But we're still continuing on our actually learning of how to use the very basics of PowerShell. And next we're going to move into our providers. So our providers are, you're going to interact with providers similarly to the way you interact with a drive. So you interact with a drive like going to the C:\D:\. Well, providers, we've got a certain amount of those that you're going to interact the same way. We have a registry provider, meaning you can get to HKey current user by HKCU:\\, and interact with it just like you would any other drive. Same way with the local machine, HKey local machine. Certificates has its own provider. There's several providers out there. So what does this mean for us? Well, that means, especially as security professionals, we can start building tools to look for certain things. As I'm actually in Sands malware analysis class right now, and a lot of the fileless malware actually writes itself to the registry sometimes. And so now we can use PowerShell to kind of go through the registry and look for these indicators, right? So it makes interacting with the Windows system and Linux system much easier. But on this slide, basically, if you want to get more information about it, the help file for providers is you get help about _providers. It's kind of like, again, it's kind of like the man file in Linux. You can read all about it. So there's certain things you can do whenever you do get PS providers. You're going to see everything you can do. So the registry and all that. And then some of the things you can do with like it should process, filter credentials and transactions are certain things you can do. With the should process, it means you can do things like we'll use the parameters what if or confirm, meaning with the what if parameter, it's a switch parameter, so it's either on or off. You can write out this command that is going to do something. If it's going to do something destructive, you might want to use the TAC what if, or the what if parameter. And what that's going to do is it's going to go through step by step. Hey, if I really were going to run, this is what I would have done. I would have done XYZ, 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 right? So you could actually test out your commandlet to see what it's going to do before you do something destructive. Lesson learned on my part, what I was doing was I was in the middle of creating my remove user tool. Well, I never put a check in there to check to see if the user already exists. And if it does, go ahead and do all this stuff. If it doesn't exist, to exit. So what happened was I ran my tool one day, and luckily I used the verbose switch. But what it was doing was, because the way you select the user to remove was not there, it went to the top of my users list and just started deleting everybody's files. And I just happened to be doing something else on the computer, and then I looked over, and since it was running verbose, it was saying, hey, I'm deleting XYZ's documents. I'm deleting XYZ's desktop. And I started freaking out. Luckily, the person that it was deleting, I knew that person and they were deployed. And so I was able to restore their files, and they never knew the mistake that I made. However, the point is if I would have used the what if, it would have went through, not deleted anything, but told me I was deleting all these files. So that was a lesson learned. And then confirm, if you use the confirm switch, basically it's going to tell you yes, or it's going to prompt your user to select yes, continue, or something like that. The filter parameter, we're going to see later to where we do a lot of there's a where object commandlet that we're going to use to kind of filter out a bunch of noise. Whereas if you build the commandlet or your tool with a, or some of these PS providers, they have a filter parameter already built in, meaning we can do the filtering and getting rid of most of that noise on the left-hand side of the pipeline, which speeds up processing later on down the pipeline. And we'll kind of talk about some of that later. Credentials, if you have the credentials, that means you can pass it an alternate set of credentials. So a lot of times when you're working in PowerShell, the PowerShell terminal is using the credentials that you logged in. If you're trying to do something, especially like on a remote system or something, and you need to use an alternate set of credentials, you would use the credentials parameter. Excuse me. And then transactions. Basically, it's keeping track of the things that you're doing. It supports writing its transactions to a log, which is good because then it also allows you to roll back any anything that it may not have worked or whatever, you can roll it back. And then this is just a useful tip at the bottom. Most providers will have the word item in it. Meaning that the command that you use to interact with the provider is going to have. So to interact with the registry, you're going to use get child item and things like that. And so now that we're talking about providers, now we can set up some what we call profile scripts, meaning if you create your own aliases that you really like to use in your own environment, you don't have to create them each time you open up PowerShell. You can create a profile script that's gonna, every time you open up Windows, it's gonna load your profile script and it's gonna have all your preferences already in there, but you have to build that script yourself. You'll notice that, or at least in my environment, I always open up my PowerShell to C:\scripts. That's just because that's where I keep all my scripts and that's where I want to work out of. A lot of the times it'll open up in a different location. I just set my profile up to open up to C scripts to save me some time to move into that location. You can also set up things like, to create directories and files and things. Instead of the old way in Windows, you used to, or in Bash, you make dir, or in Bash, you do a touch to create a file. I don't even remember how to do it in command prompt, but in PowerShell, it's the same commandlet. You're going to use new tag item, and then the very next parameter is going to be item type. And that's where you're going to specify whether it's a directory or a file. And then you can go finish. Then you have to give it a path. Speaking of paths, you have path parameters. So if you're not familiar with the literal and relative paths, a literal path, it starts at the very beginning of your directory, of your system. So in Windows, it's generally C:\\. Is where it's going to start. And then your path to wherever you want to go from that point on. So in Bash, you start at root or the / forward to whatever path you want to go. That is your literal path. Your relative path means wherever I'm at in my on my terminal right now, I want you to start here and then go somewhere. So that's going to be relative to wherever you are on the system. So like I said, I start in C scripts. So all my relative paths would start from C scripts to go somewhere else. If I wanted to go to C Windows, I'd have to go // Windows meaning take me up a level and then go back down to Windows, right? So that's my relative path to Windows. So when you're navigating the file system, I didn't mark the dots on here like I just mentioned, but if you, it uses somewhat of a regex when you're working with the file structure, not file structure, but the path structure. So it uses a star for 0 or more characters. We're all used to that if you've ever done any type of regex, right? I need you to go this far till you stop, whatever. And then the question mark is a single character, right? So that means I only want you to go 1 character. So I've got some examples. Here we go. All right. So we're going to close out of this one. I'm not saving it. So here's when we're talking about relative paths. You see that my terminal is already in C scripts. I'm trying to get to this file. So I'm going to start where I'm currently at. And I'm going to go to demo scripts, get file navigation. And it should open it up in this new tab for me. So here we go. So let's play with this. So with this get child item, I'm going to get everything, and this is my literal path because I'm starting at the beginning of my operating system. So I'm going to go C scripts. I want you to go into one directory. That's what this says. So you're the first directory and grab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Grab any PowerShell scripts that are 9 characters long. So let's see what we get back. So there we go. So my demo scripts has these 3 PowerShell scripts. So what can we do with this? Well, we know we have IOCs out there that may be a certain character length. Here's how we can find that. Find me all the files that are X characters long, right? And if it has a file extension, or we could probably put a star here and it'll pick up any file extension. So we're going to do it again. This time we're going to only look for scripts that are 4 characters long in the first in only 1 directory deep. And I don't have anything. Now let me try something. Let's see, run as administrator. Now this is my physical machine. This is not the virtual machine I'm working from. But if I go if I do those same commands, pull them up here right quick. Item C, colon. If I go 1 directory deep, give me 4 PS1s. Give me all my PowerShell scripts that are 4 characters long, but I only want you to go 1 directory deep. There we go. So I have my C examples that has my nmap and trap PS1s. And then my scripts PowerShell has GPOs, Java, and test1. So that kind of gives you a better understanding of how that really works. The star says, I'm only going 1 directory deep. And that plays in a role here in a minute with this next one. So it says, I want you to go one directory deep and just give me all the PowerShell scripts. So when we get that, so we go into C scripts, So it's just my current directory. Oh, that's because I'm starting at my relative path. So starting at C, starting at this PC. So starting here, only this directory has PowerShell scripts in it. The rest of these do not, that are on the root of the directory. See? So kind of give you a visual. See, there's no PowerShell scripts on this level. So that kind of gives you a visual of what we're talking about. But now, let's see if we go 2 directories deep, what do we get? Here we go. So C scripts PowerShell has my get IOCs. My C scripts demo scripts has everything that I'm going to show you today, pretty much. And if I were to do this on mine, C child item, go 2 directories deep. So go 2 directories deep and find me everything that has that's a PowerShell script. This may take a minute. So I'll pull that back up here in just a second. So now, so that's how we can navigate the file system without really knowing where everything is at. We can take guesses and things like that. It'll also take the recursive. So if I were to do, hang on, let me scroll back down. So if I hit up arrow, so if I go 1 directory deep, and then from that directory, I want you to go to all subdirectories, you could always use recurse. And that'll go through each and every directory underneath that first one. But we're not going to do that because that's going to take forever. Okay, so here we go. My C Vagrant Machines has a script. My C scripts WMI has some scripts. Script folder, script folder, script folder, script folder. So yeah, mainly just my script folder has all my scripts, other than my Vagrant Machine folder. All right, so moving on. So here are, before we start talking about these providers, let's get TAC-PS providers. Here we go. So here's all the built-in default providers. So we can access the registry, all the aliases, environmental variables, the file system, which is your C, temp, D, whatever drives you have installed. Any type of functions, you'll be able to interact with those just like a normal drive. Your variables and your certificates and your WS-man, if you're not familiar with it, that's Windows implementation of their remote management for PowerShell, essentially. So we're going to mess with the registry. We're going to look at some things in there, and we're going to access it by the HKLM and HKCU, which are actually the only 2 registry keys you can deal with in PowerShell right now. All right. So let me scroll down. So get child item HKLM. So we're going to go to local machine, go to software. We want to see what's in the current run folder, which is nothing. Same with the current user. Let's see if I have anything in my personal one. ECU. We could also just do, let's do it here. Let's see. Let's see what's in the Windows. So here we go. So under the Windows portion, we have these with the properties. So this is where we were going in the current version, which is the next part. We could go shell WinLogon. Let's see what's under WinLogon. There we go. Password expiration. So this is how we interact with the registry with PowerShell. Again, you can also use here later. I'll show you how you can digitally sign your code with your CAC, and we'll be using the certificate PS provider with that. So we also have this measure command, which is kind of nice because it'll measure how fast something took or how long something is. So if I run, this kind of pulls everything together. So if I wanted to go get everything that was 1, 2, 3 layers deep to grab everything, how long would that take? So if I run that, so I'm measuring this command, the get child item. It took 2 seconds and 788 milliseconds to run. Whereas if I knew exactly where I wanted to go, I could run it. It only takes 29 milliseconds. So that just kind of shows you if you're trying to be quick about it, know exactly where you're going because it'll be faster. Whereas if you don't necessarily know and you're trying to guess or trying to use a bunch of wildcards, it's going to take a little bit longer to get where you need to go. Mainly because this is probably producing more output than this one is. Because this one knows exactly where you're going and it's going to only produce what you need to produce. All right. So you heard me talk earlier about objects. Everything in PowerShell is an object. Well, what does this mean? Well, unlike Bash or Linux, where everything is a file, you can only do certain things with files because it's nothing but string text, right? Whereas a PowerShell object is a physical thing that you can do something with. We saw earlier that you can do things with it. It's properties you can pull, properties you can set, and things like that. You can kind of sort of do that with Bash and command prompt, but it's a little bit more difficult, meaning you have to tweak it and do more steps with those types of ways of doing things. PowerShell, it's so much quicker and easier. So with objects, you know, like I said, it's a single thing that you can do something with. It has properties, meaning it's how it describes the object. You can think of, everyone always refers to the bicycle, right? You can have a red bicycle, a blue bicycle, but they're both bicycles. The bicycle is an object, red and blue, which are the color. So the color is a property of the bicycle. Methods. Methods are things that it can do or you can do to it. Meaning you can ride the bicycle, or you can put the bicycle on a stand. I don't know, bad analogy, but methods are things that you can do with it. And then the collection would be an entire set of objects. I think in this term, if you're used to a different scripting language or a programming language, this might be what they're calling the class, meaning it's a bicycle, has two wheels. It's a class. Everything is the same in this class other than the properties and the methods and things like that. So let's take a look at some of what I'm rambling about here. All right, so if you guys are familiar with the command prompt, we have the command task list, or the application task list, right? If we get the member, what does get task list have? Well, we see that it has all these methods, right? It contains copy to. So these are things we can do with get task. Whatever task list produces, these are things we can do with it. We can get the types. We can pad left, pad right, split, two upper, two lower. We can send it to bytes. It's only got one property, which is the length. It means we can measure how long it is. That's it. However, if we do get process, we type that to get member. Look at all these other properties we have now. We can sort in property names and site. That means we can start filtering on this stuff. We can, do something based on a property name or a property start time. This actually even has events in it. So right here. So later on, we're going to talk about, if we have time, we're going to talk about the events. So if a certain process stops for whatever reason, we could create a tool that, hey, if this process stops, I want you to start executing these commands and to do something. We can't do that with task list. Task list didn't have any event names. But if we do get process, we're seeing all these processes that are running. Code, I saw some SVC host, VMware tools. Now if I do a task list, it's producing the same thing. Code, SVC host, but because this is a, oh, I didn't point that out. So at the very top here, you'll see that task list, whenever it produces its things, it's producing a string, right? So because task list produces a string, there's not much we can do with it. Whereas if we do get process member, it produces a process object, right? So now that it's actually an object, that's something we can act upon. We can do things with it. And here's some things we can do. We can convert it to HTML, and then we can send it out to processes HTML. So if I hit, so we'll give it a minute. And then once it's done, actually while that's happening, a lot of the things I'm doing in Windows can actually be done on Linux now. I'm going to go ahead while that's running. I'll go ahead and open up Linux terminal that I have open. So this terminal here is actually going to my other, I think it's a CentOS 8 virtual machine. Right now, you can look at the prompt and see that I'm in bash. So if I do $shell, I'm in bash. But if I do pwsh, give it a second, now I'm in PowerShell. So now I can do the $ps version. You see I'm running PowerShell 7.1, the same version on my Linux. So now I can do get process here. See, these are the processes running on my Linux machine, right? So let's do the same thing. Let's get process. Let's go ahead and get the member right click so we can. So it has a lot of the same properties, as we can see. It has the same 4 events, right? Exited. I think they're named a little different, but it has 4 events, meaning we could actually act upon an event. If a process has exited, execute XYZ script to do these things. Send me an alert. These are things we can do. And it's the same object. It's a system diagnosis process. It's a process object. And we can still also do HTML. We're going to stay in the same spot. We're going to do, and we'll look at that here in a minute. So we come back over here. This should be done. So if we do processes, HTML, it should open up our default editor. We're going to go ahead and do Internet Explorer. I should say our default browser. And close out of that. And here we go. So now we have a nice HTML version of our processes. So what can we do with this? I don't know. You can export it to HTML, maybe build your boss a really nice dashboard if he wants to see what processes are running, or maybe a tool will take it. But the point is you can convert these processes to another type, object type, right? So maybe we don't convert it to HTML. Maybe we convert it to JSON. A lot of our tools like to ingest JSON. So now we can do that and then send it out and have another script ingest the JSON file. I believe our thing, yeah, this script has finished, but I actually need to come over here to open it up. Terminal. Let's do that, and it should open up in Firefox for me. did not. That's something I got to troubleshoot. It worked for me when I was practicing, but it's still the same thing. You can produce, you can export those processes to JSON, XML, CSV, whatever you need to, either for a report or for your next tool to ingest, whatever the case may be. So we're gonna go ahead and close that out. All right, so we can get processes. We're gonna get the member. We're gonna so we're gonna start filtering using our where object, where I can grab the member type is equal to the property, meaning, hey, only give me, instead of giving me all the member types, give me only the properties, things that I can do with it. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm just going to start here for now. Let me just run that portion. So, like I said, I've only got the property types, or the member type of property. Something you can't do with a string, right? So now that I've got these, I want to group these. Yeah, here it is. I want to group them by member type. Actually, let me take this portion out. Yeah, let me delete that. So now what I'm doing here, instead of just grabbing the property types, I'm going to grab all the member types, but I want to group them by property type or member type. Am I doing that right? Yeah. So I'm going to grab all the properties, separate them, and then I'm going to sort descending. So if I run that, oh. Group by member type, sort object, count, descending. Okay, so here is a classic, or not a classic, here is something you need to worry about when you are running PowerShell side by side. There's something in my command up here in this get process, get member, group type that PowerShell 7 does not like. I'm gonna have to troubleshoot that to figure out what portion it is, but you can, but it works in PowerShell 5, meaning get process has 52 properties. It has 19 methods, 7 script, and so it's sorting everything for me. That means if I try this copy over here in my Linux machine, it should fail. Yeah. So maybe it just doesn't like descending. Oh, there we go. So it works in Linux. So I must have had a typo a minute ago inside my Windows machine, but it does essentially the same thing, right? However, on Linux, this is interesting. It's got 8 script properties versus the 7 over here in Windows. So there's some of the nuances between Linux and Windows, even though it's, oh wait, let me see if I can get this to work. I see. Missing the dash. So no, okay, so PowerShell 7 has 8 script properties. So whenever I was talking about you can do stuff with the scripts or with the objects. So here's a get service named bits. We can start, we can stop. the service. So before we do that, let's go ahead and get service bits. So right now, the bit service is stopped. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and start the service. For some reason, it's not carrying over. It worked the other day. Oh. Do I have to? For some reason that's not working. I think I have to give it a computer name. But what we can do, if the actual method doesn't work, we can always send it across the pipeline. And we'll talk about the pipeline here in a minute. We have a get service commandlet that does essentially the same thing. So we can send it across the pipeline. Hang on. It's let's see. It is doesn't show the start type. I have a feeling that this particular service start type is set to disable, and that's why I can't start it. So we can do to figure that out. We can do select. The select object. We're going to definitely want the name separated by start type, and it is set to manual. So now we can do get service. It's a set tech service bits tech start type to automatic. Access denied because I'm not running as an administrator. So we're going to run as administrator. And I'm going to take this. Run it. Set service automatic. So that should work. So now if I run this commandlet, like I originally wanted to, dash, there we go. That still didn't work. So we're going to do it like that, and it still didn't work. All right. So that is not working for some odd reason. But that is how you would normally do it. I'll have to troubleshoot to figure out why that's not working. Really bothering me, it's not working. All right, we're moving on. So let me see if it'll work on the Linux machine. So if we get tac get service, I don't think Linux has a get service. It has get process. So get a supplicant. All right. So let's member method. We can do a kill, which will stop that process. What I have found with Linux, though, this works. We can kill the processes. However, we cannot start them. Exit. I do sudo pwsh. Process wpa supplicant kill. Now it's killed. So now if I get so it's not auto tabbing complete for me because the process is not running anymore. So that's kind of how you work with objects. Let me see if I can run through a couple more before we go on break. Close out of it. So I kind of went through some of this, the get process, and so VM. I think we have to have VMware tools installed, or it might be the virtual memory. Yeah, we're getting the virtual memory of the processes, and we're sorting them by the virtual memory. And then we're selecting the name, ID, and VM, and then we're going to get the member of it. So we can send these objects down the pipeline.
I got a question.
ahead.
Hey, can you scroll back up a little bit? What I wanted to know what the difference is between doing a dot start and piping it into a start service.
So let me see if I can give you a definite answer. So the dot start is actually a method of the get service commandlet, whereas start service is a commandlet all of its own. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that's kind of the question. Yeah, so the dot start is more or less a function of the attribute of that one command, whereas through piping it into its separate command.
Yeah, so if I do get service and I get the members again, we'll see that we have a start method, right? Whereas if I do a get help on start service, we'll see that it's a commandlet, all on its own. So we could essentially, instead of piping it to instead of getting the service bits and then piping it to get service, we could actually just do start tag service, and then we could give it a service name. So it's multiple ways to do the same thing.
Okay, that's what the bottom line is. Functionally, they're about the same. It's just going about a different route.
Right, and then with get service, you probably, it looks like you have more things that you could do with it, provided, yeah, because it's a commandlet, you can do more things with it. Whereas if you just do the method, it's the method for that one particular service. So if I do a start service with the name, I can, instead of starting each individual service, I can do a star to start all my services, right? Or I can give some sort of wildcard where start service A star. So all my services that start with an A, go ahead and start those. So functionally, you can do different things with them as well. But they essentially, in the end result, they essentially do the same.